Right, today we're going to have another look at the lawn tractor. I did finish the servicing and various other jobs on it about a month ago, but this is the first opportunity I've really had to take a look, and I know a lot of people are interested because this one is now 11 years old, and what have I had to do? Well, not very much really, but there were several things that I noticed that I might have to deal with in the future. The main one was that when I was collecting leaves, I allowed the deck speed to drop, and next thing I could smell burning rubber from the belt where it was slipping on the pulley, and I broke my own rule because I didn't keep a check on the speed of the fans of the blades. So I know at some point that belt will now fail, but I do keep a spare. But as I said a year ago, they're double-sided belts and they're not cheap. So I broke my own rule there, so anyone buying one of these, just keep an eye or an ear on the speed of the fan of the blades, and that they are rotating, because once the belt slips and it starts to burn the rubber, it will eventually fail. The motor has been absolutely fantastic in the 11 years. It's the only Kawasaki motor I've ever had. I've never had a Kawasaki motorcycle, and it's running, as you can hear, and after 11 years it's still nigh on perfect. There's the motor, the V-twin, 15 horsepower, which I'll now turn off. That's better. Well, as you can see, absolutely no leaks of any kind. Never had any problem. Just an annual oil change, a filter change every 2 years I do, and I use aftermarket filters, because if you go to a mower centre for a filter, they charge quite a lot of money, but you can get them online much cheaper, and I tend to buy them in pairs. The air filter, I've never had to change the air filter in 11 years. Or the air filter's at the front of the motor. Easy to remove. Just tap the filter on the ground and then give it a brush with a soft brush, and I clean the plastic casing and the foam rubber part that the filter sits onto in soapy water, and then let it dry, pop it all back together. Never had to replace it in 11 years. So other than oil change and oil filter change, nothing to be done there after 11 years. Perfect. And as you can see, the engine is pretty much like new. Obviously I greased the kingpins, and having forgotten to do so a few years ago, I now grease the front wheel bearings, which are plastic, and I haven't had to remove the deck, but if the belt goes, obviously that will come out. It's an easy enough job to do. Just take out the clevis pins, you don't need any tools, and then the deck will slide out sideways. And if I ever have to take the deck out, I clean it carefully underneath and then repaint it, because if you don't look after the underneath of the deck, it will rust through, and that's going to be an expense. So there it is. It's 11 years old now, that deck, and it's okay. Now there is one thing I've done. If you look on the collector at the back, you can see where I've painted it black around that handle. And the reason I've done that is because there were paint bubbles. So I cleaned the paint bubbles off, and sure enough, it had rusted through. Now that part where the handle fits is right in the grass stream, the air stream, and it gets wet and it stays wet. So after 11 years I had to wire brush those rust holes, not big ones. Then I treated it with a rust treatment. Then I isopomed it, rubbed it down, and then I've painted it where you can see it around the handle and also underneath. Now there are also paint bubbles just in front of the handle, but they don't go right through. They're purely paint bubbles, and the reason for that is because that always gets messy when you're using the tractor, and it tends to stay messy until it's cleaned off at the end of the year. And of course I've cleaned and polished everything, as I do once a year. So any complaints? Well, no. How can you complain? 11 years, and this thing cuts 1 acre every 7 days in early summer, and every 8 days as the season goes on, because the grass doesn't grow quite so much. There's no dust around here, so obviously that's why I don't need to change the air filter. But so if anyone buys one of these, take up the collector at the back. This one's electrically driven, and then you can get underneath really easily. As you can see, the actuator works beautifully. I took the actuator off. Again, it's Clevis pins, you don't need tools. You just take the 2 pins out to get the actuator off, and I cleaned it and lubricated it. If you do take the actuator off, put the top one on first when you put it back together. It makes it so much easier. So anyone buying one of these, if I buy another one, which is unlikely, the first thing I would do is get underneath, which is easy enough to do. You can just prop that up if you want. And I'd put a coat of paint over the whole of the inside of the top, because it's quite thin steel. So that's the only real job I've had to do this year. The bumper I put on, this is a boat bumper, has done sterling work, because I continue to knock into things. The actuator is still okay, but then I take that off every now and then and check the operation and lubricate it. There you are, it works perfectly. And other than that, after 11 years, I do nothing. I've had to buy one fairly expensive part, and I was hoping not to have to do this until next season. But under here there is a new battery, which is about 35 quid or thereabouts. I was hoping to get away with it, but it just got so bad after 10.5 years use that I just bought a new one. So how's that? 10.5 years on the same battery. No complaints there. Tyres, just perfect. No complaints there. All I do is pump them up to 1/2 bar every year, which is about 7 psi. Give it a good clean down. As you can see, it all looks nice and clean. It won't be as clean as that in the middle of the summer. And there it is. I think for a 10-year-old machine, that's not half bad. So would I buy one again? Absolutely I would. I've got Husqvarna chainsaws and they've always been excellent. So I think for an 11-year-old machine that cuts an acre of grass every week from late February to late November, it's pretty good. So I know there are a lot of people interested in these things by all the views that I've got, so I hope that's of some use to somebody. So we'll leave it there.